Hello, treasured friend, and welcome to another story spotlight from our official subreddit, r/MrRipper. Today's story was posted by you/Scorpius187. Thank you for sharing it and for helping us break in the new long story flair on the subreddit, designed specifically to help us find stories for more videos like this one. What I'm saying is, please, for the love of mods, flare your posts. Please, I'm begging you. Now, without further ado, I present to you The World According to Sapphire Swiftrunner. I figure if I'm going to make the first long story post, I should do it with one of my stories that hasn't been told here yet. So sit back and relax, y'all, as I take you on a ride with Sapphire Swiftrunner, the swift stride shifter, arcane trickster rogue. Kinda just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? This campaign took place around the beginning of last year with 3 of my friends, 2 of which are fellow DMs. The idea behind this campaign originally was for the 4 of us to just have fun in a no-stress campaign where we would each take turns DMing for a month or so. We were hoping to work it out where the one player among us who'd never DM'd before would be able to get a chance to take on a DM role without the pressure of having to hold down an entire campaign on their own. The other 3 PCs are Nehemiah, the human necromancer who talks to his dead relatives, literally playing the caretaker. Go read up on it if you haven't already. It's an amazing concept. Liliana, the half-elf bard, Froskin, the dragon-born fighter sorcerer. We're playing D&D 5th edition online on Tabletop Simulator. Everybody's level 8 for this one, since in all the other campaigns we're either playing or DMing in everyone's like level 3, and this campaign was mostly just meant as a DMing exercise more than anything else. Froskin's player is taking the first shift at DM. Sapphire was a character concept I'd been wanting to play for a long time, and this campaign seemed like the perfect place to give her a go. Since this campaign was going to be considerably less serious than our others, I figured, why not go full bore and really have some fun with it? At least, I thought it was going to be less serious. Within about 2 sessions, the campaign went from fun side game to very serious discussions about very serious topics, but that's a story for another time. So I made some tweaks to her to make her more interesting. I hadn't played a low wisdom character in a while, and I had a crazy backstory already in mind for the tomfoolery I was about to hoist upon my fellow players. Sapphire's backstory is that she's from the wastelands of Aussie, and her parents died when she was a baby. She was found by jaguars who took her in and raised her. For approximately 20 years, she lived as a jaguar, and the spirit of the jaguar infused her, giving her a more feline body and the ability to shift into a jaguar-esque form for a short time. It's not a full transformation, but her facial features change somewhat as her face becomes more cat-like and her fingernails become 3-inch claws. When she was around 20, a caravan heading to Faerun to establish a trade route found her and took the time to try and communicate with her. They soon discovered that while Sapphire had no concept of civilization and language, she was actually extremely intelligent. They managed to convince her to go with them and began to teach her the ways of civilization. She learned to speak, read, and write Common in just a couple of months as the caravan made its way to Faerun. They also learned the hard way that Sapphire can quite literally steal the clothes off your back, so they trained her even more in the art of stealth and deception. Basically, she's like Catwoman, if Catwoman could actually shift into a cat-like appearance. The background for the campaign was that about a year before the campaign started, Liliana and Froskin met after having been captured by slavers. Shortly after that, they escaped the slavers together. 6 months before the campaign started, they met Sapphire. The 2 of them had been trying to track down a small group of bandits for a bounty, and they managed to catch up with them as they were attacking the caravan Sapphire had been traveling with. After the 3 of them fought off the bandits and realized that Sapphire was the only survivor, Liliana and Froskin took her with them. A couple months later, they met Nehemiah, and thus they became a party of 4. Everyone in the group has their own little quirks, but as a group, they somehow mesh pretty well. The first session of the campaign started out with the group arriving in the city of Westgate. At this point, Sapphire had been in Faerun for about 6 months, so everything here was still pretty new to her, as well as being vastly different from her life living in the wastes of Aussie. As the group walks around town, Sapphire is pointing at everything, asking what things are, random things like road signs, forks, etc. She's seen all these things before, but she gets so excited about literally everything that she forgets what she has and hasn't already seen. When it comes to civilization and society, she's basically a 2-year-old in a 21-year-old's body. But at least she learns things fast, especially if they're written down. As they're looking for a place to stay for the night, the other party members remind Sapphire to stay close to them and not wander off. So of course, as soon as she sees some shady guy on the other side of the road selling things, she immediately goes over to inspect his wares. Sapphire still doesn't understand how to communicate with people, and the concept of personal space is completely lost on her. So, in her excitement and curiosity, she stands inches away from this shady guy, staring into his eyes like she does with everyone because she always forgets that it creeps people the hell out. He's trying to spout off his sales pitch, and every time he turns his head, Sapphire moves to stand in front of him again, which is throwing him off quite a bit. About this time, the party realizes Sapphire's run off again and start looking around for her. They see her talking to the shady merchant and go grab her on their way to the nearest tavern for ale and a room. Liliana says, "Sapphire, you can't just run off like that. Someone might try to kidnap you or something." Sapphire replies, "Kidnap me? They can't kidnap me if they can't find me," and casts invisibility on herself. The party sighs and continues on towards the nearest tavern. Inside the tavern, people are doing tavern things, drinking, gambling, etc. Sapphire's flaw is she has a weakness for the exotic beauty of the people of foreign lands, and there are a lot of people in this tavern, which is definitely in a foreign land to her. Also, Sapphire's concept of sex is very different than most people's because of her background. To her, sex is mating, and it's just a thing you do. No big deal. Pretty people are pretty, and Sapphire likes pretty. So with that in mind, she looks around for a higher perch she can sit on to scope out the place and find pretty people. It's a one-story tavern, but tables exist, and tables give her enough of a height advantage to see all the pretty people. Eventually, she notices a couple guys arguing over a poker game, and when they leave their table to beat the hell out of each other, she jumps up on the table and starts people watching. This tavern is on the smaller side, though, and she gets bored of that pretty quickly. So she looks down at the table, at the cards the men had been playing with. Having never seen playing cards, she makes the assumption that they must be some kind of flashcards or something, so tries to put them in order. She ends up with a line of cards that reads 2, 3, 4, 6, 5, 7, 8, 9, Jack, King, Queen. Having just recently learned about letters and numbers, she was frustrated that she couldn't find a 1. She does find a 10. So she sticks that in front since it has a 1 on it. A few minutes later, finds a random ace and decides that since it's a letter, it should go in front of the jack since letters belong in alphabetical order. She still has some issues with counting. Math is hard. While she's doing this, all the rest of the bar sees is cards floating and moving around on the table by themselves because Sapphire is still invisible. During these shenanigans, Froskin has ordered drinks and Liliana has tried to get the group a room. Nehemiah starts having an argument with his dad's spirit, which sounds like when someone is talking to someone else on the phone and you only hear their side of things. None of the rest of the party understand what's happening as he's never explained it, but he's done this ever since they met him, so they just roll with it. You know it's a strange party when the 9 intelligence, 11 wisdom dragonborn fighter sorcerer who wields a katana is the normal one. Liliana, being a bard, is the best candidate among us for negotiating for a cheaper rate on the rooms since we're kind of broke at the moment, but she's not having much luck as the tavern owner tells her they only have 1 room available, and even with her negotiating skills, she can't get the price down to something we can afford. So she makes a deal doing the other thing she's good at. She'll play music for the tavern and give 70% of whatever she makes to the barkeep in exchange for the room. As the rest of the party gathers back up, they see an empty table where playing cards are randomly moving and floating about. Knowing the kind of nonsense Sapphire gets up to, they realize she must be over there and figure they might as well join since she's already found them a table. Froskin sets down the drinks and everyone takes their mug of ale, except Sapphire, who immediately dips her hand into one and puts it to her mouth to lick the ale off. The party, and anyone in the tavern paying attention, see this hand-shaped splash of ale floating in midair, followed by an unseen tongue licking away the floating ale. The others look at Sapphire like, really? And she suddenly stops mid-lick as she remembers that A, she's still invisible, and B, they're in a people place, and she's supposed to act like people in a people place. She dispels the invisibility and grabs the tankard around the main part of the tankard with the handle pointing away from her. As she takes a drink, she sees that the other party members are still looking at her with the same expression and realizes something is still wrong. She looks at Froskin, looks at Liliana, looks at their hands, and realizes she forgot about the handle. She's also still sitting on the table, but the party is so used to that by now they don't even bat an eye. A few moments later, a guy who is obviously a pirate gets up from a nearby table and comes to talk with the group, accusing Froskin of being a former pirate on a boat with him and claiming Froskin owes him money. Nehemiah and Froskin finally convince the guy that there's more than just one dragonborn in the world, and as he leaves, another pirate from another table wanders over. Liliana wanders off to play music and try to earn our room while the rest of the group talks to this second pirate. Sapphire scoots across the table and leans in real close to stare at whoever is talking as the party converses with this guy, getting right in everyone's faces as the conversation bounces from person to person. After a bit of conversation, he invites them to come talk to his captain about a possible job. The group half-heartedly agrees, mostly because we're kind of desperate for money at this point, and after another round of drinks, the pirate proceeds to start telling seafaring stories. Sapphire leans over and puts her hand on his chest and says, "I like your stories, they're fun," as she's going through his vest trying to find papers that explain what this job is. She finds a dagger and stuff, but apparently this guy isn't high enough on the totem pole to actually know what the job is, so she doesn't take anything, leaving him to continue to tell his stories. Liliana comes back a while later and reveals she's not making much money and they're probably not going to get a room at this rate. Before she goes off to play music again, Sapphire says, "Wait, what if we just give you some money and then you pay 70% of that?" Liliana starts to say that we don't have any money, but before she can even finish, Sapphire has hopped off the table and is now moving through the crowded tavern. I can tell the DM she's going to be pickpocketing as much money as she can and roll for sleight of hand, which is a nat 19 for a 31 total. Sapphire comes back a few minutes later with about 40 gold in some poor dude's pants, which she sets on the table while dropping the gold on the floor. The rest of the party turns around to see some dude standing at the bar with no pants and completely unaware they've been taken right off of him. Froskin rolls his eyes at her and picks up the gold, but we get our room. 1 bed for 4 people. Now Maya and Froskin agree to let Liliana and Sapphire share the bed. By this point, the party is well aware of Sapphire's sleeping habits. First, Sapphire always ends up taking off her clothes in the middle of the night because she gets too hot, and she generally forgets to get dressed in the morning. Second, Sapphire will sleep with literally anyone she finds pretty, because mating is a thing. This is compounded by the fact that it's really hard to find a steady sex partner when you scare the ever-loving hell out of them because you shift into jaguar form mid-romp. When you're living your life as a jaguar for 20 years, it's hard to adjust to people habits. However, each of the party members has made it clear they're not interested in having sex with her, so she doesn't try for anything with them. She just waits until Liliana gets in bed before laying down and curling up on Liliana's feet. The other 3 just look at each other and sigh as everyone goes to bed. At this point, they're just hoping to wake up before Sapphire heads downstairs and gets arrested for indecent exposure for the 5th time this month. Hello, my dear friend. Dave Makes Noises here. Thanks for watching this video to the very end, and thank you to you/Scorpius187 for sharing your story and sending our long story Flare on its first journey through the cosmos. If you'd like to share your story with us in hopes of seeing it end up in the channel, please share and flare, if you care, over there on our official subreddit, r/MrRipper. We also read stories from the subreddit every Sunday on twitch.tv/MrRipperstream. So if you want your story told live, come say hello and request your story. If you're wondering what kinds of noises Dave makes, you can find me on TikTok at Dave Makes Noises, where you will hear many noises made by me, Dave Makes Noises. I hope that this week you are making time to reflect on what inspires you. Thanks again for watching. Please sub for Nat 20s. We love you here at Rip Daddy's house, and we'll see you again soon.